Thanks for all of you joining with us. We're really excited to be here. We'll start with introductions. You want to start, Maria, and then I can follow you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria, and I am an actor and a director and an arts organizer. And we are in a lot of change in my industry. So it's great to be here with you today.
My name's Deacon Warner. My background is in education. I taught social studies for 12 years in Minneapolis, and for the last 12 years have run a youth program at Film North and have kind of immersed myself in youth media, even more than I did when I was a classroom teacher. And critical literacy is a big part of the work I've sort of done through all of that. Interested in having young people be able to get their voice out there, create their own media, but also become better, more critical viewers of all the stuff that we're bombarded with. And I know the organizations you work with, I've had through my years with Film North, had chances to work with a lot of your different organizations and know that you do a lot of all this stuff, youth media stuff as well. So really excited to have you here and very excited to work with Maria on some exciting theater games as well. I'm gonna pass it back to you, Maria, to give our land acknowledgement.
So in June of this year, if you're unfamiliar, there has been a huge list of demands, and there is a website called We See You White American Theater, and there are thousands of our BIPOC colleagues that have put together it's like 30 pages of demands on theater practitioners. And one of those demands is that for every meeting, they're asking for a land acknowledgement to be read. And of course, this isn't an ending place, but it is a beginning. So I am going to read one for all of us. We want to acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional land of the Dakota and Ojibwe peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have been its stewards throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land that we inhabit as well.
So we're moving on in our day today, just as an overall kind of plan. We're introducing this idea of critical media literacy, but we're also going to go through some kind of best practices of how I'm sure all work with youth, and how we're kind of converting that to be working with youth in this platform, kind of keeping some of those best practices. And that's one piece is land acknowledgement that I know was a newer piece in some of my youth programs. Maybe it's just a little interaction. If you're in a program that uses a land acknowledgement, can you just type a 1 in chat and we can see if that's something that is become best practices for most of our organizations or not. I see Jocelyn put a 1 in there. And if you don't have your chat open down at the bottom, go ahead and open up the chat screen. We're going to be adding things into that throughout the session today. So that's something to keep an eye on. Any other ones? Anyone else using land acknowledgement? Well, that's something that I imagine we're going to be more and more conscious of. And another thing that we've been doing for a long time is whatever class or workshop or term is starting, working with a group of young people, we start with coming up with some kind of community agreement or norms of behavior, how we all want to work together. And that's kind of the next step we're going to go through today. After that, we're going to do a storytelling game that will kind of introduce the notion of critical media literacy, and then we're going to dive in deeper into what exactly that is and use campaign ads to take apart and deconstruct through kind of the lens of critical media literacy in an activity that you could do with young people as well. And we'll have kind of an interesting end to that at the end of our session. So that's the overall game plan. But back to our community agreement, I'm typing in, let me undo that, a few things to start our list of agreements. And it's not typing as yeah, there it is. Okay, sorry. We're all learning together in this. So the first things I put in there, mute yourself unless you have a question or comment. That's just kind of a new thing for this platform that's helpful. So if I see most people are already doing that. It's also a way that can let us see visually if you have something to say, if you unmute yourself. Another good norm is to, if you can, keep your video on. This is a difficult one because there's privacy issues, but when possible, especially if you're talking in the small breakout rooms, it's nice to be able to see people and communicate easier if you have that on. That maybe when you're in your small groups, you can talk more about issues with that. And another idea to have in there is just to take care of ourselves and our bodies. So if you need to get up and move around, please do that. If you need to get some water, please do that. If you need to just stand up, stretch, even though we're on camera, let's make sure we're taking care of ourselves. I'm going to throw a few more ideas in here. And Maria, if maybe you can talk a little bit about those. And then the rest of you, if you could add to this list that we're starting to create, we'll introduce more ideas. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, please put some in the chat that you are using. That's always helpful to hear and see other examples. The speak from your own experience, use I statements. Now, some of you have just joined and you might be wondering why your name has been changed to wolf, dog, or sheep. So when we go into those activities, speak from the statement of your character. But when we're sharing examples, it's always best to use I statements. And also just be aware if you're someone that is a very auditory processor, just be aware of how much space you're taking up in the small groups and encourage others to speak. It's not really about everybody having the same amount of time. But it's just making sure there's room for everyone.
How many people, let's do another one of those ones. How many people go through this process, create agreements with their youth groups when they get started? And you can throw in that list as well. I'm seeing some good things. Be intentional with language and pronouns. Excellent. Thank you, Shani.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear. Okay,
And thanks for those updates. Sorry about the needing to leave. Well, that's exciting. It looks like a lot of people are have this practice and go through the community agreements. If there's any other ideas that we should be adding to that list, go ahead and throw them into the chat. And we can continue to kind of expand that list as we go. So with that, Maria, should we transition over to our exciting game?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a very, very short story. And as I tell this story, I want you to listen to the story from the perspective of the character that you've been given. So you are either a wolf, a dog, or a sheep. And when I say that, I want you to think like, does your character speak? What's said about your character? And then what are the actions that your character does? And then from there, we're going to go into small groups and you're going to answer some questions based on the perspective that you have been given. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Okay, great. So you are now being cast as a role. Here we go. Once upon a time, the wolves got together and they had a meeting and they decided to elect an ambassador to go over and talk to the sheep. And as this wolf spoke to the sheep, they said, you know, sheep, the potential for our friendship is really, it's being interrupted by those horrible dogs. The dogs, they nip, they growl, they are provoking us. They chase us and they bark at us and they're so aggressive. If you can just dismiss the dogs, we can form a peace treaty and we can be dear friends. The potential, it's amazing. Well, those silly sheep, they listened to the wolves. They dismissed the dogs and became very easy prey to their enemy. Dismiss not your friends for your foes. The end. So Now, we're gonna zoom you off into your world, and I really, really speak passionately from your perspective. Jocelyn, do you want to give us a little information about?
Yeah, so right now Deacon is putting into the chat some links. And so you're going to want to find the link that corresponds with your character. And on the first tab, you're just going to stay on the first tab for that. There's some questions. And so as you first introduce yourselves when you get into your small group, and you're going to have a good amount of time for it. We're going to have about 10 minutes and we have small groups. So introduce yourself and then start going through those questions and talking about what your character's response would be. If you find you've really fleshed that out and you have a couple minutes left, this is also a great opportunity. It's gifted time for you to get to know some of your colleagues a little better. So if there's any questions or things that do pop up, there's an ask for help button on the bottom and one of us can join you to answer any questions that you all have. But with that, I'm going to send you out. There will be a time clock of about 10 minutes up in the corner that you can keep track of how long you have. Deacon, anything else to add?
Maria.
Maria?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, when you're zoomed back to us, you will speak to us as dogs. As dogs, this is what we thought about this story, or as wolves. So just be ready to advocate for your opinions.
So another important note, in that extra time you might be gifted, you all have to figure out who's going to be reporting back for your group.
And we will be able to screen share your notes so we can look at the notes that you've typed up as you're working.
All right, we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I am so excited to hear what you talked about. And just to get things started here, I'd like to hear from the wolves. Wolves, how did you, do you have a spokes wolf? How did you feel about this story?
I can go ahead. We were just in the midst of figuring out who was going to speak for us. The story, towards the end, we concluded that there was more to be heard before we could have a better sense of the context and a better sense of the power dynamics that played out. But overall, we thought as wolves that our interests were served well, and we got what we wanted.
Can you state what that was that you wanted?
We wanted the sheep to be in a more vulnerable position so we can attack and take advantage of them as we please.
Yes, because you have to feed yourself, right? I mean,
yes.
A wolf has got to eat, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
and maybe you've got some wolf cubs at home, perhaps?
Yeah, we've got an entire families to feed, so yes.
In fact, I think I can hear some babies crying for more food even. It could be true.
Yes, you're hearing correctly.
Oh, nice. Well, so wolves, this story, it worked out well for you. Is that right?
Yes, it did work out well for us.
Not spiritually. I don't feel well about like how we behaved, but if this is the characteristic of a wolf, yes, it did. But I'm a wolf with a conscience, and I felt really bad.
Okay. Well, what is it? Can you say a little more about what you felt bad about specifically, Wolf?
Just like the manipulation. It's like I think I was placing like a lot of like human characteristics into the story. And so I think that may have like tainted my view of like how I perceive the information. And so that may be part of it. But just like I said, the manipulation of knowing like these sheep are vulnerable, they're trusting. And so just using that against them and to our advantage. I just think that was very self-serving and very selfish. While we get to survive at the end of the day because we have food, these sheep don't get to go back home to their families.
Well, they don't get to go home because they are in fact dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I sad for them.
I appreciate appreciate the consciousness of the wolves, but I also see that your families have been fed and things have worked out for you. Thank you so much, wolves. We might have some dogs and that have some questions for you later if we can circle back. I'd like to hear from the dogs. How did this work out for you? And I'm
All right, here I am, sorry. Well, you know, we were really just left out of the whole thing. We really were. And we noticed that the other sheep were too. Really, the wolves are the only ones that came together as a collective. And so, you know, and apparently we're being employed by the sheep, like even though we have a protective factor, like we're employed by them, they just dismissed us without like talking. And so seems like our outbursts were left out of that story because maybe we could have convinced the sheep if they listened to our outbursts and realized how they were being manipulated.
mm-hmm. Dog, I do have a few questions for you and your other workers. How do you feel like the value of your work was being interpreted by the sheep?
Yeah, they didn't value it. They didn't question it.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, I mean, it seems like from hearing from our wolf colleagues, you were doing a good job.
Yeah, I mean, they had to get rid of us. They had to cut us out. Otherwise, they couldn't, you know, get to those sheep. So yeah, that's, I think that the sheep maybe realized a little too late what was happening.
Yeah. And yeah, they lost their protection, and the workers, you were doing all the work there, using what you had, growling and patrolling. So great to hear from you. Is there any last words from the dogs? Like what's your future going to be now that you've been fired?
You know, yeah, we're wondering what happens in chapter 2 for sure. And you know, we're sheepdogs. I don't know if we have trouble being dismissed, or I don't know. I don't think we can just go sit in the sun though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. It's so in you to be a protector. It's part of you, who you are. Okay. Well, yeah. Chapter 2. I'm very interested. What happens for you? And now, from our last group, the sheep. Oh, they're waiting. They're waiting for some more grateful sheep. Oh, okay. Good. Thank you, dogs. Sheep. How do you feel about this story? How did things work out for you?
Well, we felt like that the sheep were, sort of portrayed, or that we were trusting and maybe a little bit naive, and that it feels bad that you can't trust people, or that the element of trusting means that you're maybe not so smart, or and other things.
I hear you. There's some embedded assumptions, right, in this story that you've just named. Trusting wolves is not good. Mm.
Right. And we felt like, maybe we did have power, that we didn't hear about the deliberation of the sheep, and how we sort of decided whether or not who we wanted to trust and other things. But so I think we did have power, but it didn't feel like it. And we didn't sort of use it. The story between the sheep and the dogs was a little bit missing, and we only heard it from one side.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that storyteller called you silly. How did that feel when you were told you were silly?
Yeah, no, we didn't like that. And I think that fed into the sort of feeling of naivety and foolishness.
Mhm. If you could say anything to those dogs, I know that you're speaking from another world, as you are all dead now, but what would you say to those dogs that had protected you for all those years?
But we were confused.
Oh, you were confused. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. And any message for the wolves?
Yeah, not nice. Thanks for tricking us. You weren't honest with us. Shame on you, wolves.
Yeah, that peace treaty that they were talking about, it didn't work out so well, did it?
Right.
No, no.
Liar, pants on fire.
Yeah, liar, liar. I wonder if that has ever happened in our world where anyone has ever lied about a treaty. Can anyone think of any examples? Wolves, you've been kind of in the hot seat here, but are there any other wolves in our world that have offered peace treaties that maybe didn't work out? Because I think that, like, in terms of the United States, I think that there's been 0 treaties that have been made with our Native Americans that have actually happened. So that's something to think about as well. There are many wolves. And what is this story telling us? I appreciate the wolf with the conscience that it said, what does it mean to trust? What is the story asking us? Not to trust each other? What is protection? What does it mean to be protected, and who are people that protect us? So I'm just going to end this section. Thank you all so much for participating and speaking from your perspective. I'm just going to end with a little limerick for you. There once was a farm with some sheep, with the farmer's intention to keep. The dogs were dismissed and things went amiss. The wolf's dinner, incredibly cheap. Thank you all for doing the perspective game with us. When I'm working with young people, we always end it with 3 claps and a snap. So here we go. So we are now going to wrap this activity into the larger ideology. Deacon, should I start out?
Yeah, I'll do a screen share with that, with the points that you're going to start talking with. And I just put in the chat a link to a document that's got all of our kind of notes on critical literacy that people can download and have as a resource. But I'll share that first page that you're going to talk about, the critical literacy stuff.
So I, for 25 years, I ran a program called the Neighborhood Bridges program, which was doing a critical literacy program with youth in our schools. And those of you that have read, critical literacy can be a very academic topic. And I know for me, I'm like, wow, there's so many words to say simple things. So I've tried to boil the definition of critical literacy down so it's easier for me to get inside of. And so here's what I've come up with. Critical literacy is an orientation to reading and listening that includes an understanding of how texts, and that's any text, an oral story like I just told, a book, a media, position the readers. And we, like, from a marketing standpoint, we get that, right? Whenever you go to a movie, the movie wants you to think a certain way. Texts are active, they are not passive. How readers position the texts. So that's all of what we just did. If you were a dog or a sheep or a wolf, you were positioning the text a certain way. And I was teaching in an indigenous school in Hawaii, and I told the story of Hansel and Gretel. And I said, any questions about the story? And a woman said, yeah, that's a story about a bunch of dumb white kids. And I was like, oh, really? Can you say more? And she said if they were native, they would have been fine in the woods. They would have known how to get yams and kill boars. So that point of critical literacy really made sense to me in that moment. Who you are, you're going to interpret the text differently. And then lastly, how texts are positioned within a certain social, cultural, and historical and political context. So where we are in time and space really shifts the meaning of text. Some questions that are frequently asked in a critical literacy setting is like power. Who had power in the story? Voice. Whose voice was represented, whose wasn't? So we just heard from the dogs, like we did not feel like there was a lot missing in that story from their perspective. And then that leads right into visibility, who and what was missing or left out.
And I'm going to switch over to a couple other concepts. There's a lot of different ways to look at media literacy, critical media literacy, and having worked with it over the years, it's evolved. 10 years ago, when I was giving a workshop on this, this was kind of a way that we boiled it down as another kind of way to look at it. A lot of the same ideas, just kind of put together differently. But this also, I think it's important to understand that media includes everything around us. It's not just a story. It's not just a campaign ad. It's a poster. It's all kinds of things that are just bombarding us, and we can apply these same questions to just about anything that we're observing. But all this media is constructed. There's intentionality to it. There's creative techniques being used, and this is especially in my world of media production and teaching kids how to make their own media, giving them the awareness of what those techniques are and how we're being played by those techniques. The positionality that really, I think this story with the dogs, wolf, and sheep really get at is good at understanding how different people experience the same media message differently. And then, of course, the idea that there is deeper messages embedded in everything that we're taking in, and that the people that create these messages have a point of view, no matter how objective they expect to be. We all have our subjective views, and they come through in the media that we create. And that often there is some kind of power play in that media being created. Whether it's, I want to win the election, or I want people to think I'm cool. You know, there's something people are gaining something from putting this stuff out there. It can be good things. And oftentimes that's what we want kids to do, is create their own media messages that are positive. But that's kind of another way to look at it. I found this table this week when I was looking at more recent literature on critical media literacy, and it's a lot of the same questions, but just a deeper dive, looking at critical media literacy through these different kind of specific lenses. Social constructivism, what's the social context? You know, we're wolves and we need to feed our cubs, and we're used to eating sheep. You know, that's a social context. Language, you know, whether the youth are creating a video poem, there's a certain language with that. If they're writing rap, if it's an ad campaign, there's language and things that we need to understand within all these systems. Positionality, we've talked a lot about different groups see it differently. That there's always bias, politics of representation, that we just can't help but have a point of view, and it comes through, and acknowledging that point of view is important, and questioning it within the text and media that we're looking at is important. The media texts have a purpose, that, you know, who's making it and why, the same kind of idea, again, structured in this new framework. And then this notion of social and environmental justice, to use that lens to look at the media around us. Who's being advantaged by this and who's disadvantaged? And just asking those questions to get a deeper understanding. So that's kind of the nutshell of these different ideas around media literacy. But I think we all, I'm sure, are into active learning. And I think the best way to really understand these ideas is to apply them. So what we're going to be doing soon, breaking into groups, and we'll do a little of this together, is taking yet another set of questions that get at media literacy and applying them to these campaign ads. So these are questions that I think especially are effective looking at something that's produced media, that can employ some techniques that we know about in, you know, like editing techniques or lighting or how we're constructing audio. But these will be the focus questions that we're going to use in this activity. So as we look at commercials, in this case, we'll want to look at the point of view, who made it and what's their purpose. The appeal, that's another kind of production term. What are you noticing? Is it humor are they using? Is it emotion they're getting at us with? Is it fear? What appeal is being used? Is it a celebrity? Is it really high energy, fast paced editing, or is it scary editing? Take it apart. What techniques are going on there to make this commercial work? And then what's your position? What meaning does the message have for you? How might others interpret it differently? What's that subtext that people are going to read differently depending on their place in society? And then some other language of commercials. Who is the target audience of this message? Who is it trying to reach? Is it a general audience? Is it specific? How is that affecting the message? And then what's missing? What points of view are not part of this media that we're looking at? And I want to just, to get started with this, I'm gonna take a look at, I've got a link that I'll share with you in your groups to all of these different ads. And I'm just gonna pick one to begin with randomly. Let's look at it, and actually, I'm gonna do one thing before I start it. Let me put these questions in your chat so you can have access to those as well. Jocelyn, can you do that? You want to add those questions to the chat, and I'll get us looking at this. So we can go through a couple of these, but I'd like you to, in the chat after the ad, try to answer one of those questions. Who's the target audience? What appeal is being used? Just pick one of those questions, and we'll see if we can start pulling apart these ads. So here's our first example. Oh. I'm going to do that again, sorry.
I was sleeping in my car and didn't have any hope for a long time.
And Tony Rankin was offered a second chance.
Sorry, learning together.
Gave new investments to neglected communities, and jobs are coming back.
Life is good.
Okay. Once more.
I'm an Army vet. I was homeless. I was sleeping in my car and didn't have any hope for a long time.
Then Tony Rankin was offered a second chance. President Trump's opportunity zones gave new investments to neglected communities, and jobs are coming back.
Life is good now. Life is worth living. The president does want to help people like myself to be lifted back up in these low-income communities.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
So we've got those questions. Who made this message? What techniques are used? How does this message have a different meaning for you or for others? Target audience. There's a lot to pull out there. Let me see a couple comments from chat. What do people see? Definitely Trump campaign, made and approved. That's pretty overt in campaign ads. Yeah, and there's a specific appeal to a lower income, people of color. Who's being represented? Who do we see in the commercial? Who's speaking? Would it be, I think it might be useful before we break into groups. I think that's where this will get really interesting when we can really talk about this. But let's just take a look at one more example. Can I get someone to pick one? Just type in a name from this list and we'll take a look at one more as a group. Anyone bold enough to pick one?
Okay.
Maria, you want to pick one?
Well, insult has been picked in the chat.
Oh, I missed. Okay, here we go.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Joe Biden insulted millions of Black Americans.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Black.
Worse, Biden wrote the mass incarceration laws that destroyed a generation of black families.
We have no choice but to take them out of society. Away from my mother, your husband, our families. Lock the SOBs up.
He insulted us, jailed us. We must not elect him president.
So there's a very different tone there. Short title.
There's a really important us in this clip, comes from the chat.
Yeah, excellent point.
Invoking
Much more fear.
Yeah.
Mhm. A very different tone and very different appeal being used in this ad. Right, invoking fear. The use of a black male narrator. And the less color. There's getting into some really specific production comments. That strange desaturation that they add to the footage to make it more ominous, more fearful. Other things, you know, the soundtrack. What are you hearing in the music? What kind of what's going on in the background of the music, and how is that adding to the message? Those two pieces had very different audio experiences going on. How is graphics being used? How are facts being introduced or not introduced? All of these things are kind of combining to create this. I think it's probably, this is most interesting to dive into our small groups and start. So what we're going to have you do at this stage is we're going to be getting back into the same groups, and within your group, you'll have, if you go back to the same note tab that you had before, you'll notice there's another tab at the bottom for analysis. These are those same questions. So we're going to get into our groups and choose one of those commercials to share, and I'll put that link. Jocelyn, can you add the link as well? Oh, it's in your ad here. In the tab is the link to that list of different commercials. So in your groups, look at the list, pick an ad. You can look at a couple, but pick one that you're going to really dive deep into and maybe watch a couple times and break it apart, deconstruct it based on these questions. We're going to take more time for this. So we'll have about 20 minutes to do this analysis of an ad. And in the last 5 minutes, we're going to throw a wrinkle into it. Another sort of best practice, trying to engage students with creative ways of approaching presentations. So we'll be joining your groups later in your conversation to introduce the outline for how we want you to present. But
there's a couple things. Oh,
go ahead, Maria.
There was just a couple things in the chat that I thought were such great points that didn't get named, and that just the one-sidedness, that it's like Biden did all of this, and there's a point in there that, you know, nobody acts alone, but that is, they're putting all of this onto him, and then the fear mongering.
One other quick note before we go into breakout rooms. I'm sorry, Maria.
Well, I think I was going to say what you're going to say. Look out for some of those sheep. We're mixing the sheep in.
Because we do have small groups, we're going to go ahead and let our sheep join the other group, but please be very welcoming to them. They've been harmed. And so that way you just have really rich conversation in those small groups. And so, so our sheep, you're all going to be joining the dog group and the wolf group, but the wolves, they are conscious now of their error. So it is a safe and brave place for you. So as they mentioned, unless there's anything else, Deacon or Maria, we're gonna send you off to those breakout rooms. And in a little while, they'll come in to be able to give you kind of some of the next steps for those activities. But on that spreadsheet, it's the second tab. And if before they come in, if there's any questions or things that come up, feel free to click that ask for help and we can send somebody in. When they do come in, continue your conversation. You don't need to stop. They'll find their way into it as time allows. So we will see you back in about 20 minutes.
Welcome back, poets. Welcome back, writers and poets.
Is
this everybody? Do we see your group mates?
See, I believe.
I think it is. Everyone's back. So they're either if there's anyone missing, I'd have to go through our list, but I think we're good.
So I want to just say that I can't wait to hear what you came up with. And you can also say this was the dumbest thing we've done all morning. So it's not going to hurt my feelings if you're like, why did you have us write a limerick? You can be critical. In critical literacy, you can be critical of your instructors. Okay. I just invite you, invite that. But I'll just kick us off here with a limerick. It's not such a difficult task for us all to put on a mask. If it slows down the spread and reduces the dead, how could it be too much to ask? So there you go. I did it too. And then also one other thing that we did when you were in your rooms is I put that Aesop fable in the chat. So if you want to do the same or adapt the exercise for the youth you're working with, that story is in the chat. All right. Well, dogs and sheep friend group, we would love to hear your limerick.
I wonder, would it be useful to look at the advertisement first before each group talks about it?
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Let's do that. Good idea.
So I can switch over to a screen share and if people can tell me which one to show.
President Kamala.
Okay, here we go.
This legislation applies to future presidents. If a president suffers a crippling physical or mental problem, the 25th Amendment creates a path to discharge the powers and duties of his office. 25th Amendment gives Congress the power to establish how this transfer of power would take place, with a strong role for the vice president in what would happen. Why now? Because this is part of our agenda.
Wow. I know the group I was with didn't actually finish a limerick, but I think in presenting, share the limerick if you have it, and then share some of the insights about the commercial that came from it, and talk about that whole activity. Dogs, are we gonna hear from dogs first?
Forgot to make a new person. And I know my group didn't want to be the person the first time. So we have conspiracy to put Harris, oh wait, you wanted, conspiracy to put Harris in, fear, confusion, radical left. Biden is dying, Kamala will become president. And then we put some alternate ones. Watch out, Harris will be president. No, Kamala will be president. Don't let Kamala be president. Like some alternative, like last one, trying to figure it out.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the major takeaways that your analysis came to, kind of that you represented in that poetry form?
But first of all, awesome that you got some words together. Fun. Thank you for going for it.
Congrats to my team.
Yeah.
So the video, there's a lot of fear and confusion. We were really distracted by the mask not being worn properly by Pelosi. But so there was like this message of getting this conspiracy of putting Kamala into president and voting for Biden. And there was like all this like amendment talk to make it seem like it's kind of like really confusing. There's a lot of like hand motions. There seemed to be maybe like speeding up and things. So you didn't actually like understand the content, but just like by the end, you should understand and believe that, you know, don't vote for Biden, because apparently Kamala is horrible. I mean, like that was the message. And so, I don't know if anyone wants to add anything from my team.
Yeah, one thing I noticed on the second view was that they would have Pelosi's speaking in the background, but then the main points of synthesis that the Trump campaign wanted you to see or wanted you to take from Pelosi, like big in the screen, which was partially what made it confusing, but also kind of like a subtle way to like make you think that you were understanding Pelosi's those sound bites as in your own way, on your own view, when it was really they were just feeding you like what they wanted you to see or understand.
And we also talked about how, like, because it's just to convince you that there is a secret conspiracy, they don't have to say any particular reason to dislike her, because any of those reasons would work for some people and not for others. So it's kind of more accessible and broad to just say that there's a conspiracy.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that.
Should we switch over to hear from the other group and take a look at that?
Yeah.
What's the commercial? What was the name of the one you guys were looking at?
Which group?
What was it again?
Which group? The wolf group or the sheep group?
The sheep. I'm confused on the groups. The second group, the one I was in.
Okay, we did the Get Hype, Go Vote.
This one, okay.
Yeah.
Please welcome my husband, Joe Biden.
Former Vice President Joe Biden just released that announcement.
Joe Biden is now a 2020 presidential candidate.
Biden will enter this race as the front runner.
I know Joe. We know Joe. But most importantly, Joe knows us.
Candidates coalescing around Joe Biden.
His campaign made history.
Joe Biden has selected Kamala Harris as his running mate.
This is your campaign.
Now's the time to fight for what we believe.
The 2020 presidential election is less than 2 months away.
The presidential race is tied.
This election is in no way predetermined, and it's going to be close.
Yeah.
We have got to vote like our lives depend on it.
So take it away, Wolves. You can share what you have for your limerick.
I feel like it's still a little decent, even though we're missing a couple lines. So we didn't actually get to finish because we're all processors and we're trying to work through that. But we have one that is capable, and let me just click on this picture. Okay, one that is capable and nation saving, he is able. Cringy morality, if we vote, we win.
Yeah. Yay! Yay! Congratulations.
Thanks. That's all we were able to complete in our time.
Do you want to share more about just that conversation though that led up to creating the limerick and the insights that you guys shared?
Sure. So I think for some of us, we found the video to be, like they said, it was a very high video with the music, the very fast pace, like images that were happening. And so it was like, for me, it was like hard to like focus because it was all changing so quickly and so fast. And that there was also representation of various racial and ethnic groups. And also there was like a lot of women and like youth and children that were part of like this campaign video. It appeared to be uplifting, short and sweet. And even though it was a minute, it seemed a little faster because of how rapidly things were coming across the screen. For others, it felt a little cringy to watch, and it felt like like using the words like restoring the soul of a nation was kind of like a guilt trip tool to get people to like vote one way or the other. And if you don't, then like you're sinning or committing some kind of like crime against the country. And also thinking about the difference in language of like thinking about Trump's slogan of making America great again and then restoring the soul of a nation, and how different are they as we think about what does like great mean in reference to America, and then what does the soul of America look like? And so how are those two things different if we think historically about what they were in the past and how that has or has not changed currently? And so we talked a little bit about that as well. And we thought that this campaign video was used to target a younger demographic and to also try to show some of the cool that Joe Biden tries to present himself to be with his little aviators and all of that. And so, yeah, so I think that's generally it. We had a pretty good discussion, hence the fact we didn't really get much into the limerick portion, but I don't know if there's anyone else from my group who would like to add any thoughts to the group about what we discussed. It doesn't look that way, but that's all.
Thanks for that sharing, Shani. It was really great and nicely, concisely explained.
Yeah,
you guys had a great conversation.
I love that. Just thinking like, who gets to decide what the soul of America is? Like, that's such a provocative thing to think about.
I wanted to just mention, Maria, you opened up the space for people to criticize the activity and those type of things. And I did already mention this to Maria, that these are the type of things that if I was in a breakout room, I would start like getting a little bit nervous about. And I was reflecting on that with her because I have this sense of like, oh, I need to do it right, or there needs to be this product at the end. And she reminded me, such a great piece is that we ask our young people to do this type of thing all the time. And so for me to be in that situation where maybe I'm a little bit uncomfortable and trying to figure out what does it look like is a really important piece in our own learning. The other thing that I, again, clearly preach more than I practice, but thinking about that product versus process. And so even if the end product was not necessarily the goal, right? Like that was something to work towards, but that conversation and the digging into it together and that processing, that's the piece that was really important about that activity. And so again, I don't know how you all felt being presented with an activity like this, but I think for me, it's a good reminder that one, I need to practice being uncomfortable with activities, and that because we do ask young people to do that, and really to focus on that process and how are we creating space to have these conversations, and knowing that the activity or those processes that we use to maybe come up with a product is not really necessarily about the product. And sometimes it is, but being clear about what the expectations are for you as you're doing these activities.
And just to add on to that, the strength of that, I love that Maria's idea to do limericks as another way to process it, but that's pedagogically, throwing in another piece that makes you have to think about it in a different way, even if you don't, whatever comes out, that's really useful and good for our brains. So transitioning now, this activity can be used with any medium. I've done it with, cutouts from magazine commercials, and people make posters where they break out these questions and analyze the commercial in the same way that we've done with a campaign ad. And you can do it with just about anything. So it's a great activity for hands-on deconstructing using this critical media lens. I'm also a big proponent as a really important way for our young people to become media literate, when I talk about literacy, when we talk about reading and writing, they are hand in hand. You're not literate if you don't write. It's not like you just read. You learn to read and write, and you become a better reader by learning to write. And it's the same with media and constructing media. And I know a lot of the organizations you all work with have youth media already programming that embeds that and gives youth the opportunity to create their own films. But I think it's vitally important in this whole teaching of critical media literacy as well, just because of the insight that you inevitably get from creating your own stuff and learning the tricks. Like, wow, I can take this interview of my teacher and make that person look really smart, look really confused, look funny. I can do whatever I want with them. I could cut them up and make it look however I want. You know, that's something really valuable to learn. So I did want to end up our session with touching base a little bit on youth-made media and sort of the insights that come from that. And we have a great Sprockets made video to use as an example. So Jocelyn, let me pass it over to you to introduce this film, and then we'll take a look at it and get the reflections from some of the youth you've worked with and what they've gotten from making stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Deacon. So for those that don't know, Sprockets is our out-of-school time network in St. Paul. So we traditionally are not youth program providers. So Eric and I both in the past have kind of served in that role, but within Sprockets haven't been. But we have the last couple of years been serving as a site for Right Track, our city's youth employment program. So this summer, during our pivot, what we originally planned for our young people to do this summer changed. And instead, we ended up hosting 10 young people, high school and early college age, to create messaging and media around COVID that we could share out. So their audience was their peers and community. And so I just want to point out a couple of things about our project. So we are not, that's not a filmmaker. I'm not a communication specialist, right? We're helping to support these young people in doing that work. But we did tap into a couple of resources. So we had a consultant, a communications consultant, come and do like an hour-and-a-half workshop around key messaging and thinking about audiences. And we also had later in the process, JIC, which the cities, it's their Joint Information Committee. So whenever there's a crisis or something, all of the different departments within the city come together to make sure they're consistent with their messaging and things. So as they started developing pieces, they would be able to get some constructive feedback from those folks. Often it was just affirming what they were doing was really well, but there was sometimes some helpful pieces. And so we are not media producers typically, and a lot of this project that they did on their own. So we knew they were going to be making like memes and posters and that kind of pieces. But early on our first project, we had an opportunity, and it became the first project because of a deadline. So we were talking about our deliverables. And this summer, the Central Honors Philando Castile was doing a virtual event, and they were looking for community videos from organizations to share and that. So we broke them up into 3 different teams and asked them to create a video. So because PSAs are thinking about COVID messaging was new, we did start out with some community building pieces. So we did a word cloud with folks to say, what's an issue that's important to you? And so all these issues would come up, and then we had them work on 2 to 3 sentences to share as a way to introduce themselves about why that issue is important to them. So creating their own personal PSAs. So we did a little bit of scaffolding in that way. But beyond that, when they got it together in their groups to create these videos, it was really on them to think about what is the key messaging. We talked around COVID and how they wanted to produce them. So I don't know, Deacon, how much do you want me to preface about this particular?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, we'll take a look at it, and then we can, I'm really excited to hear the reflections of your youth too. Is exciting to hear after.
Yeah. So they couldn't be here today because they have class, but I did talk with them, and we have a recording of them doing some reflecting as well. And so, so this was one of the pieces that was created for, and I'll share it now, for the Central Honors Philando event. So it's a little bit longer than these other ones that we were watching. It's 2 minutes and 32 seconds.
Our communities are hurting. Long-standing, systematic health and social inequalities are killing our communities. Ethnic minority groups are disproportionately affected by the legal system. Ethnic minority groups are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. does not discriminate, but America does. African Americans are at a much higher risk of contracting COVID-19 than the rest of the population. This is because discrimination, housing disparities, lack of resource and access to healthcare, lack of education, what can you do? Protect yourself and your community. Take action from home. COVID-19 does not discriminate, but America does.
Way to go, kids.
Yeah. Wow.
Awesome.
So we could do the same activity with that media and give it a critical media lens, but they got to do that themselves when they made it. And they made those choices. Really a great example. I'm so glad you get, it was such a perfect fit with our campaign ad stuff.
Yeah, and I certainly would be interested in some of your all reflections, but one thing I want to note is that this was one, and they talked about it later after we were, the different teams would view each other's, but I mentioned they talked about what was personally and really important to them and around social justice issues and public health. Their assignment was about COVID messaging, but they were able to weave those two things together. And that they created on their own. That was not part of the expectation. The expectation was a video that had healthy COVID accurate information out to the community. And so really appreciated their finding that way. And again, a reminder, I don't know how to make a video. I would not have been able to create that with the images and the voiceover and all those kind of things, that they figured those things out together as a group. And so it was like very minimal support in terms of the adults. And so it was really helpful thing. So I don't know if there's other people's, you can put them in the chat too, but I do have a reflection from the young people. I met with them earlier this week. And we talked a little bit, it's been a while since we made these. And so we reflected on what were their thoughts when they were creating theirs, and they watched that video again and were reflecting on it, but I captured one last piece. So if there's nothing else, you want me to start with that then, Deacon?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just a few minutes of a conversation that I had with them earlier in the week. This question I was thinking about, it was not a main function of our summer program to really think about what other media was out there, right? You all were creating media, but I'm curious if, I don't know if you all have seen on the news or in your social media streams, but the different types of messaging that's going on right now, whether it is around social injustice or around elections, but having that experience of having created some, do you look at other stuff that comes across differently now? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
I do look at them differently. I guess I'm just, after having been part of the process of creating a message myself, I feel like I'm more aware of what goes on in the background, and just they're specifically targeting this kind of audience. This is the kind of message they want to convey, and just knowing that technical stuff that you don't really think about when you haven't had this kind of experience or learning about, I guess it's you're just watching a movie, but you take a film class And then you're like, oh, this is what goes into making a film. And they're just like this many cuts and they're doing this on purpose, I guess, which is what's happening to me right now with my film class.
I think I pay more attention now to the language and just the way how they try to grab like attention's audience. Like someone, yeah. So for instance, there's this one ad I saw on TV. It's like, it was a Trump commercial actually. And it was just saying how Joe Biden is this, Joe Biden is that. It was just, it looked kind of scary too. Like it was very like a dystopian type of like imagery that was on the commercial. And I don't know, it was just saying a lot of like bad stuff about Biden. And then it was like, this message is brought to you by Trump or whatever it was. And I feel like with that, like I was able to notice like just like the language that was used to make it like Biden seem like this horrible, terrible person, you know, and it kind of just made Trump look like, you know, amazing, you know. But yeah, just being able to see that, and also just like how like the negative language that was used, like as well as with like the dystopian, like kind of scary type of like visuals, like that really kind of just like as soon as you finish that commercial, like you see, oh yeah, you know, Biden is bad because, you know, the language that's used and like the visuals that are used makes it seem like it, because everything kind of like connects together. So yeah, I feel like I pay more attention to the dialogue, and yeah.
With like ads and stuff, we're all told that the first few seconds is very crucial for like the consumers who are watching it as well too. So if you don't get their attention within those first few seconds, you've already lost them. So there is no hope of them ever coming back. And I feel like now that has sort of become the reality, because now when I watch ads, I like pay close attention to all the things that Celine said, and that kind of gives you off if the ad is good or if the ad is toxic. So.
And so I wonder if you have thought. All right, let's see. Oh, there it is.
Well, I think that's so interesting that they didn't go into that project talking about media literacy, because they talk about it so well. We're nearing the end of our session here, and getting to the reflection. I think that, Jocelyn, do we have time to go around and have a little reflection from everybody as a large group?
I think so.
Having gone through our couple exercises, applying a critical lens, and then looking at some student-made stuff, you're all working with youth in different settings. We'd love to have kind of a final wrap-up reflection. Maria, why don't you lead this part?
Yeah, that's so just that of everything that we did today, is there something that you could lift to use with your students? And we certainly would love to take a few minutes if you have any questions, or like, I would like to do this exercise, but I'm wondering how it would work in this setting. And we can use the group to think that through. Thanks all for participating, and hope that you can use some of this in your teaching.
Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate your time with us.